Well, hey students, Professor Z here. Welcome back to our last lesson, lesson number 30 here. And we're going to be doing the do-it-yourself interior wall build. And this is for a log home, but you can do it for your own home. And please have your papers written at the end of this lesson for full credit. So tools and supplies: hammer, jigsaw, circular saw, compass, copycat, nail gun, compressor, square, pencil, tool belt with ample supplies, interior wall materials, and wall layout plan. This is different than your blueprints. Your blueprints will not have your wall layout plan. This is something that you and your spouse are going to have to develop yourself. And it's a fun little project. You can do anything you want. Pick any kind of wood, any kind of stain, do any kind of trim. It was actually the fun part of the project because this is what people will see when they come into your home, and you can make it as dazzling as you want or as banal as you want. So you're going to have to purchase a few extra tools for your toolbox for this lesson. And I liked accumulating tools over the life of the project, and I probably will do a video just on tools themselves. There's at least $10,000 worth of tools that I have. And I bought the top of the line, which I will get in a tools video. You don't want to go cheap when you go tools, so you want to have the top of the line. But you're going to need a compass, a copycat, jigsaw, air compressor, nail gun, and 30-degree slanted nails. The air gun is going to shoot the nails through the wall, and that's how you install wood paneling without having any screws or nails showing. These nails have no heads to them, so they kind of go into the wall and just below the surface of the wood. You can use plastic wood to cover over them, but we didn't have to because they were so small. Nobody would really notice anyway. So you as the student should understand by the end of this lesson how to design an entire interior wall plan. And again, you're going to have proper textures, color, and layout. And then, write up your paper, and you don't have to turn in your paper because remember, OPSEC, operational security, this is for you and your spouse and your family. When you build out your own homestead, you will have all of these papers and thought out processes. So this bachelor's degree is just to help you in your design and effort within your own DIY projects and self-build of your homestead retreat. However, you may have did what I did and built the whole thing yourself, every screw, every nail, every bolt. Or you may parse out some of the items. Maybe you didn't want to pour the footer. Maybe you didn't want to do the subfloor. Maybe you didn't want to put the steel sheets on your roof. Whatever you want to do, that's fine. Or maybe you just drew up all the plans and all of these essays that you wrote, and so you turned it over to an architect and a contractor, and they built the entire process to your liking, and you didn't even have to lift a hammer. So anyhow, it's good to get these papers written so that way you're thinking. Also, it's a fun date night with your spouse, and you guys should have much more solidified relationship as husband and wife. When you start talking these things through, you're going to find out things that your wife never even told you. And then some of you ladies will find out what your husbands are thinking, and you will understand what his likes and dislikes are for the interior of a house that you may or may not have known. So step one, planning the milestone. This milestone will start out with another lesson with you surfing the internet. You have to check out the internet to find suitable websites with variations of walls. This again goes back to your textures and your stains and your colors. And some websites are really good because you can, mix and match things up and really get creative. And sometimes you can get really funny when things start looking like pink polka dots inside your bathroom. So in my log home, I wanted to keep it looking like a 15th century European Catholic church. So I used all pine and stain, clear stain. I hewn my own beams and had clear stain on that. And then I wanted to make it look like a library on the bottom level, like the Library of Congress. So you'll see the spiral staircase and the darker stained walls, and it just, everything just popped. And yes, I did this myself, ladies, if you can imagine that. So, but anyhow, do a grade A job if you want to take this on yourself. If not, get a contractor to help you out. Step 2, you need to have final inspection sign off. I always say that your house should be built for resale. So for instance, if you are building this yourself, DIY project, you need to understand if you wire it like I did, if you plumb it like I did, if you structurally build the beams, everything needs to be signed off. They have city inspectors that'll come out and they'll inspect everything. There's codes for electrical, there's codes for plumbing, there's codes for building structures, concrete. Everything has to be signed off if you do this yourself. And that will give you better resale once you have an internet buyer, or maybe you got a real estate agent or somebody that was going to sell your house. That all looks good in the paperwork, by the way. And in some states, you have to have an inspection. And if you don't have those certifications, you will not be able to sell the home until they can get into the walls and actually see how it was wired and how it was plumbed and all of that. So you want to make sure you get this certification done prior to closing up the walls. So at this point, you want to take your certified blueprints you have marked up over the life of the project, do a final walkthrough, make sure you arrive at your satisfactory. Your light switches are in the right spot, you've got your sink in the right spot, everything has to be in the right spot. Tip, please be organized, because things can get extremely busy inside your home. Not only will you have moving ladders and moving scaffolds around the room, you'll also be making cuts, stacking lumber, and installing wood pieces, and creating the walls the way you want them. Clean up your workstation periodically. Throw your scrap wood into the scrap wood pile outside. It can also be used for future firewood starter, as I used in my fireplace. Since I used a 1x8 pine sheets that came 12 feet long, I had huge stacks of scrap wood in the great room, and I had to clean up the workstation periodically with so much sawdust, and things can get cluttered, and you can lose tools and things. And remember, it's freshly tiled floor, and I made sure the floors were tiled first before the interior walls, because the interior walls now butt the floor, and that way I don't need to use molding at the bottom of the interior walls. So that's one of the niceties that I did. If I had done the interior walls first and then butted the jagged cut edges of the tile floor to the wall, then that's where you see molding in a home, and they have to cover that. However, my jagged edges are right up to the 2x6 interior wall, so that's all covered, and it looks sharp. You'll see. Step 3 is going to be staining the wood for your interior walls. Again, you want to get to the internet site with your spouse. I say internet site because you don't know what looks good. If you walk into a home and garden store and you see 50 different stains, you're like, oh, I like that stain. But you need to try it with the tile floor that you put down. You need to try it with the hewn beams for your ceiling layout. All of this stuff can be done on an internet website, and then you can really deduce what works and what doesn't work. So you should be able to do your staining outside on a nice sunny day. Make sure it's not wintertime. Since I live in the American Redoubt region, which you can look that up, if it's wintertime, you would probably do this in the basement if you lived where I lived, because it is extremely windy and extremely cold up in the Rocky Mountains. Great views, though, by the way. It's awesome up here. Matter of fact, I got gazelles sleeping out in my yard tonight, about 4 of them. And if I hear coyotes, I'll go out there with a flashlight and kind of protect them because I don't want them to get eaten. We've got wolves up here. I've got bear prints all over the property. So just some things in the Rocky Mountains that you got to pay attention to. But the wildlife is just spectacular, and there's hardly any people up here. Matter of fact, one of the reasons why I picked this area is because if you look at a satellite map at night, almost all the lights are turned out over the American Redoubt region. But if you look at both coasts in America, it's all lit up at midnight, and speckled throughout the South and Midwest, the same thing. So I'm at the least dense area, which is beautiful. And it's the most beautiful. Yellowstone is beautiful. Everything out here is beautiful. So I recommend setting up 2 sawhorses and having a system to stain all of the wood first, and then leaning them up against a wall or a lean-to, which can be stained because you're going to let them dry. You don't want to lean them up against freshly stained logs. Then the wood has to dry. You would want to bring them inside your home, and it might get very windy out there, and you don't want the dirt all over the freshly stained panelings. Step 4, inserting tongue and groove paneling. This step will require some skill and some patience to obtain the skill. I had to look at some videos, but essentially what you're doing is you put the groove down first at the bottom, and it rests on your tile floor. It goes up 8 inches. Then then there's a tongue on top of that, and then the next piece has a groove that snaps into that. However, sometimes it might be warped or a little bit cockeyed, and you're going to have to use a chisel. And what I do is, bend the chisel down where it's like beveled up, and then use your nail gun and just nail it quickly. And then that will make it nice and flush. Now, you might be asking, well, you have a log home. Yep. It's a double D log, which means it's beveled on both sides, inside and outside. And what you want to do is you're going to need a copycat or a compass. And I show you in the video how to use a compass. But you're going to trace over the logs with a piece of, 1x8 pine tongue and groove piece. And then that's going to give you the contour of the logs. And then you're going to actually take your jigsaw and cut that contour out, and then hold it back up. You might need to make another cut, just slightly, like a little bit of trim here and there to make it nice and snug. And then I try to bevel the blade in a little bit so that only the outside portion of the tongue and groove piece is budding, and the inside portion is really cut back some, so that way you've got a nice snug fit. Tip: I used a scrap piece of pine tongue and groove about 1 foot long and held it in place against the wall, level and flush. And then I used my compass pencil and traced the contour of the logs on that scrap piece. And then I cut that scrap piece and then went up there and then did a kind of used it as a template, and then made sure it was a snug fit all the way up. Since I have a room that is 11 by 11, the 12-foot span of tongue and groove pieces worked fine. You just needed 1 piece across. However, if you have larger rooms that might be 14 feet or 16 feet long, they do sell tongue and groove up to 20 feet long. I recommend using 1 full piece because the wall looks nicer instead of having these lines in it. So it's best to do 1 full piece per course. And then at this juncture, I repeated the process and continued up the wall until I got to the ceiling or to the spot where I was actually going to stop. It is best to cut around electrical boxes as you install them during the electrical lesson, as you can go back to the electrical lesson. Make sure that they are snug inside the tongue and groove paneling. Each electrical box must be very snug, because when you put the faceplate of a plug or the faceplate of a switch, you want to make sure that it covers up the entire tongue and groove piece and your electrical box. So just keep that in mind. The inspector will look for that, by the way. And the same thing with your plumbing. For instance, plumbing the toilet and the sinks, the refrigerator, all needed holes drilled inside the tongue and groove for the PEX adapters and the copper fitting fist that came out. And the copper fitting actually hooks to the PEX, if you remember from your plumbing lesson. And then that comes out through the finished wall. And it looks really nice. It looks really nice. I'm happy. It's just a beautiful project when all this got put together. So, and you're going to continue running the paneling up the wall until you finish to where it needs to stop. Next is step 5, the closets. There's a little more detail with closets. You got more angles, more cuts, 45s. In this steps, it takes a little more craftsmanship and attention to detail than a regular wall installment of your tongue and groove paneling. You will have short cuts, long cuts, and you'll also have 90-degree corner pieces that need to be affixed properly and butted. In the end, your closet will look professionally done when you complete this task off your project plan. So make sure you have your project plan too, folks. You don't have to turn them in for grading, but it's always good to go down methodically and make sure that you completed it. Tip: installing tongue and groove paneling, you do not want nails or screws to show. That's what I was talking about earlier. So basically use the compressor and the nail gun, and I use 30-degree angled nails with no nail heads. You want to set the pressure gauge accordingly to insert the nail through the tongue and groove into the stud with a seamless finish that nobody can tell where the nail went. Nice job. Step 6, door and window jambs. Again, this is a little more detail, but less detail than your closet, but a little more detail than the regular run-of-the-mill wall. This step is a little tricky, so do your research on the internet first so you understand the entire technique before you get started. Since your 1-inch tongue and groove paneling is actually 3/4 of an inch thick, you will need to allow an overhang on your door jamb 3/4 of an inch inside the room. Also your window jamb, same thing. However, since the home and garden store did not sell 6-inch door jambs, as some places do in other regions, I had to make extended jambs myself, and I show you how to do that in the video. So on the outside of the door jamb, using a 2x6 stud, you have a 1x4 door jamb that comes manufacturing with your doors. And so you have to come out the rest of the 6-inch stud. Essentially, that's what you're doing. Tip: by this time in the project, your logs will have settled significantly. Yeah, this is the key here for you log home builders. Remember that you left 2 inches above each door and above each window buck, remember? By this time, that 2 inches will be closing in, and you'll probably be down to 1/2 of an inch, because this took me about 4 years later after I stacked the logs. I'm doing the interior walls. Remember, I'm doing this whole thing myself, and essentially there was no helpers. People don't want to get paid hourly out here for some reason. There are all these big contractors that act like they're big contracting companies. Again, I spent X dollars on the log home package, and then a contractor said that they'll put up the logs and do all the door jambs and everything. They won't wire it or plumb it or do interior walls, but they would do all of that for X times 10 amount. So if the log package costs $30,000, a contracting company wanted $300,000 to stack the logs and to do what I did. I'm like, no, goodbye. I didn't spend nearly as much as $300,000. So just a tip for you guys if you want to save money. But you're going to be doing it yourself if you live in remote areas, because you're just not going to find any helpers. So you can install door jambs after they are shimmed properly. You must use shims. This gives it a seamless look, and it's leveled so that the door shuts properly. Place the nail from the nail gun right through the door jamb and right through the shims with one squeeze of the trigger. It should be secure to the stud now. You will repeat this process for your closet doors, your other doors, inside doors, and doors that lead into other rooms. You want to make sure you purchase your closet doors and all of your household doors prior to starting the interior wall lesson 30, okay? You probably want to do what I did and actually stain these as well. Step 7, trim. This requires a significant amount of time due to the number of cuts, angles, and cuts, and the meticulous placing of molding around your log home. It will be well worth it and give it that finishing touch. There will be so many cuts, angles, and small intricate pieces to complete the puzzle of professionally looking molding that was just the wall portion earlier. You will now have trim around the doors, the windows, the walls that meet other walls, the beams hewn, the beams in the ceiling, and also any adjoining beam structures. For instance, where the loft meets the logs underneath it, it required meticulous trim and different angle cuts to go 360 degrees around this beam that was placed into the wall at a 45-degree angle to hold up the master beam over the loft area that's 20 feet in the air. It looks stellar. It looks awesome. I also wanted to keep the 15th century Catholic Church look, and I'm still doing trimming, students. So, 4 or 5 years later, I'm still doing trimming. So, and it looks awesome. The more trim you put in, the more intricate details, the more professionally it looks, and the more it pops when people walk in. So, I'm almost done. There'll be a time when I stop. Step 8, basement walls. Since your basement is pretty much used as a large utility room, storage area, and maybe some other purpose that you may have in mind, such as a workout room or workbench area, you will have to choose your wall selection properly. Be sure that the wall cracks are sealed with cement, talking about the cement walls. The floor is sealed with rubberized sealant if there's any cracks. Remember, if you live in the American Redoubt region, it is the highest portion of radon gas seeping through the soil for the entire nation. So ensure your basement is sealed properly prior to doing any interior walls. And that is a must, folks. Make sure your basement is sealed off. If you live in the upper Rocky Mountain area, there's a lot of radon gas in the soil that can seep through those cracks and then fill up your basement, so to speak. I mean, it would take years to do it, but it could be at a point where it could start causing health problems. The easiest thing was to install sheetrock on the inside perimeter of the walls, because I used IFC blocks, remember the styrofoam blocks? Then to make individual rooms in your basement, which essentially you need to install the metallic framing manufactured for sheetrock, and you use they're kind of like studs for sheetrocks, but they're made out of metal and they're kind of pliable, and you can use tin snips to cut them. You want to make sure that they're secured not only to the ceiling floor joists, but the basement concrete floor perimeter. And you might want to buy one of these 22 pistol construction pistols. They don't have a bullet in them, but they have gunpowder that you can shoot a nail through the sheetrock metallic studs and then into your concrete floor, and that'll hold it in place just fine. Tip: it is best to thoroughly educate yourself with online videos. Installing and mudding sheetrock might not be that easy. In fact, when you mud sheetrock, you must tape over the seams. Then you will mud over the tape and the screw holes throughout the wall, making it look like it's a professional job. You can paint the walls any color you like and even repaint them at a later date. You can even install carpet with padding underneath your basement floor, and it'll make it look like a professional job was done. Now you're ready to work out, so install your universal gym set, your 70-pound punching bag, your rapid punching bag, your workout mats, your mirrors on the wall, your radio system surround sound, your lighting, your treadmill, your elliptical machine, your squat rack, your sauna, and any other workout accessory you might want to have. Well, you did it, students. Pat yourself on the back and call this a job well done. Thank you for getting to lesson 30. I know that this was probably about 3 hours worth of listening. It's like 2 movies that you've watched for time duration. Again, this concludes the bachelor's degree program for homesteading retreat build, do-it-yourself project. The next set of videos will be the art of discipline of homesteading at your off-grid retreat. Those videos will be soup to nuts on gardening, orchard, animal care, animal husbandry, horseback riding, canning, freeze drying, and property defense techniques for your off-grid homestead. So I hope you enjoyed this, students. I enjoyed doing these videos. I want you guys to like them. Down at the bottom, click the thumbs up icon, and then also subscribe. The more subscribers and likes we get, the more money we can get for the university. And again, feel free to drop us a $5 tax deductible donation at www.university1310.org, where all of these resources are currently free. And in order to keep this free, we want to make sure that we, ask for a donation, and please do, because I hope that you enjoyed this enough that you feel that you've benefited from this enough that it was worth, $5 or $10 of your income, which is basically 2 Starbucks coffees. Okay, that's what it comes down to. Unless you drink the fancy stuff, then it maybe is probably 1 coffee. Anyhow, wishing you all very well on your DIY project. Remember, OPSEC, students, operational security. Keep everything hidden, even from your neighbors. And Godspeed.